last year.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, so that's how you know.
Yeah, well, I know him anyway.
Gotcha. So kind of the general premise of our inquiry is like the legacy of protest at Duke. It's really interesting for us to be students here and to only ever hear about the Allen Building protest as a point in Duke's history, right? As something that we celebrate, something that we recognize as something that's part of Duke. I'm generally very interested like in what you think about that premise, right? Like having been on campus at a time where it wasn't something that Duke was proud of, and like what that transition looked like.
Well, I thought it was interesting at the end today when a couple of the current student activists were saying when they stand up for the same things, they don't actually get a warm reception either. But we didn't. And we went through the vigil and we had the negotiations with the trustees. I was in the negotiating committee with the trustees, and it was very difficult to get concessions. There were entrenched interests. We made some progress, and we knew that, I knew when I heard about, because the leader of the Allen Building Takeover was my freshman roommate, and we were close friends, as you heard. So I knew it was coming, and I didn't know what we, as white students, could do to be supportive, because I thought they would call the police. So we tried to, as they were negotiating, we tried to join in the negotiations, but eventually, of course, the police came and we got tear gassed. But I think those were both the vigil and the Allen Building Takeover, as everybody's saying today, were pivotal events. They helped change some of the university, but a lot of the stuff that was of a concern then is still a concern today. A good example is that we won some concessions on the Local 77, the non-academic got pay raise, eventually got union rights, but of course today, most of the people who work at Duke work for contractors, so those issues still exist, but Duke is sealed from them. So one of the issues I worked on as a student was Duke was a landlord. They owned all kinds of low-income housing in that area, and we were trying to get the university to do affordable housing, but in the end, most of that housing got torn down, and we have all these new buildings like this one. Not this one precisely, but over that way. So I think, as Howard Fuller says, the struggle is always continuing. There's not an end to it. It's wonderful for us who were involved in those days to see students still concerned about issues today.
So to clarify, you were on the quad, like as the police kind of came through?
Right at the building.
What was that like?
Scary.
I mean, like I was on campus during 2016, right? And I could not imagine like having kept my tent out there, knowing that I was going to get tear gas. Like, what was that decision-making process like?
Well, we didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew the police were in the Duke Gardens of all places. And as I said, we had no experience. A lot of the black students had been so we'd been to a lot of protests, many of us, but we didn't have the experience of police coming on campus. That was the first time they'd ever done it. So we didn't know what countermeasures we could take. So we just showed up, and we got more and more people out there while the negotiations were going on. And eventually, the black students came out of the building and left, basically. So a lot of the tear gas was directed at us. We ended up in the chapel, and the tear gas came in there too, although the police didn't come in. The chaplain wasn't really supportive, but he didn't want the police coming in the chapel.
Another thing we talked about with the legacy of protest and how Duke deals with protest is that Duke isn't really one entity. It's a combination of faculty and other members of the administration. But how did that play into the protest? How did you view the administration as something that was entirely
Well, we found out, we knew, of course, the trustees were in charge. But when we did the vigil, we really came face to face. As a student leader, I had quite a bit of contact with the trustees. We didn't have a student representative on the trustees those days. But I went to dinners and stuff a few times. But then after the vigil took place and we began the hard negotiations with the trustees, I mean, it was clear they were very conservative. They represented moneyed interests, like they do now, for the most part, but not diverse in any way. So we knew that the president, who we all liked at the time and was reasonably sympathetic, didn't have any room to maneuver. And so while it was he technically who called the police in, he didn't. I don't think he had a choice in 1969. I think if we had stayed in the president's house in April of 1968, they might have called the police, but we were mostly white, so there was a difference. But we in a way outmaneuvered them by going to the quad and getting joined by as many as 2,000 students. So it was harder to call the police on a peaceful quad sit-in in those days. But of course, the occupation of the Battle Building gave them an excuse. So yeah, it was scary. I don't remember. We were so busy with tactics. I don't exactly remember how it felt at the time, but I know it was disturbing.
Do you recall how many years out you were from Duke the first time somebody contacted you about the vigil of Alabama Takeover? Just like, what's your take on this? How do you remember this event?
I don't.
Okay.
I've been contacted a lot of times. I haven't always been available to do it because I work on Africa, so at allafrica.com, so I'm often away, even though I still live in the area, so I don't know.
And I hope you don't mind me asking, all the panelists today kind of started with like how they got the bug of change. Like, what is it about their past that when they got to Duke, they were activated by the issues they saw around them and by each other? What would your origin story be?
Well, I grew up in a white middle-class family. My parents were very liberal, but they weren't involved in the civil rights struggle like the students were. I don't know. It was just step by step. I got more and more involved, and I think my first demonstration was at Hope Valley Country Club. And Bill Turner, who's here, was not allowed, a football player, was not allowed to go to the banquet, the football banquet. So we had a protest, and we had several. And of course, the Vietnam War loomed large for all of us, particularly young men. So those things propelled me. Then I became the head of what was then the largest student organization, the Y. It was the largest because all the men students, because there were separate colleges then, the student fee included a membership at the Y. So it was kind of unfair, but it meant we had a budget and we ran community programs and tutoring and other things in the community. So we had more contact with Durham than a lot of big students did. So that was part of my exposure. That's how I got to know Howard for others Durham people. So I don't know. There wasn't any one thing.
Is there anyone else we should definitely talk to?
Mark is a journalist and knows a lot. He's got a great memory. He was there. Mark Pinsky, I can remember. I don't know if Chuck Watkins is wanting to talk or not. Let me ask Mark. You're reluctant to talk usually, but you will probably do.
I'm sorry that you've been volunteering for our purpose.
That's fine. You want to find some place a little quiet or what?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we can get started. I'm not going to let you in with the plates. We can just kind of huddle here. Thank you so much, sir. My name is Rachel.
My name is Mark.
Nice to meet you. Hi. Oh, thank you so much.
My books are in the back.
Oh, wonderful.
Is that? No, it's two.
Wow.
And this is the one I give to people who don't care about serious books. This is the murder book.
Oh, wow.
Although it's the murder of it's a political book because it's the murder of a pistol volunteer up in the mountains of North Carolina.
Really?
In 1970, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Do you know Bob Forstad at all?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I did an independent study with him last semester, and that was kind
It's
of
quoted him in an article. I was
okay. Yeah, so we talked a lot about. I'm going to be working in Central Appalachia after graduation, so we
Really?
talked a lot about Boone County, West Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about like.
If you read this book,
Yeah.
it's about strangers coming into a different culture. I work. You know Jackie, his wife.
I've never met her actually.
Jackie
Funny
Ball,
enough,
you know
yeah,
who she is.
I did.
When I was just getting started and I was out of college, I worked for her doing interview prep notes when the Southern Oral History Project was just getting started. I wasn't important enough to the interviews, but I was important enough.
Prep notes, right? Look up
It's
information
fine.
about
It's
people.
fine. So they're my cards.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, and we will try not to take up too much of your time.
Yeah.
What year did you graduate?
Well, I was the class of '69, but I finished in 1970. Because in those days, nobody who was an activist or a chronicle worker graduated on time.
Fair enough. And our general premise here is thinking about kind of the legacy of protest at Duke. It's very interesting for us to be class of 19, class of 22, right? And to only interact with the Allen Building Takeover as something that there might be an exhibit in Perkins with, right? And so I guess our first question to you would be like, is there a point at which you were contacted for remarks about the vigil or about the protest by people at Duke, people from the Chronicle who were writing a 20-year retrospective or something? Like, when did that start to happen?
Probably a year or two before the vigil meeting, there was a guy at Stanford Institute doing some sort of a project, and I was staying there now with a friend at Trinity Park, and he came over with a camera and asked some questions, and we might go track that. I had 2 or 3 queries, mostly from either graduate students or faculty.
So 2 years before the collaboration that just happened last year?
Correct.
Oh my gosh, so very recently. Wow. Cool.
By the way, you have my email, so if later you want to do something on the phone or something like that at leisure,
Great.
you know, something in writing, whatever.
If you have like professionally been a journalist, were you a writer for the Chronicle during
Yes.
your time here? Okay.
I would have come to the meeting back.
You did both well.
I was executive editor and associate editor. And my roommate was that. My freshman roommate all the way through the 5th year together.
Wow.
He was the editor. And then he didn't graduate from time. He finished his editorship. He became the chairman of publications, first non-black. So there's some profound literature in noon this year, class of 74.
Oh wow.
You look up in Europe.
Okay. Fair enough. We're gonna track it down.
Until I told you.
I promise. We will write it down. Locate us. Where were you during the Allen Building protest?
I was in third floor flowers building. We had made an arrangement with Chuck and I, we had felt that the narrative of the vigil had been hijacked by the university. And we made Duke University News Bureau the headquarters of all the out-of-town journals and the facilities available. And we determined to let that happen again if we could avoid it. So we agreed that Chuck would tip me off the night before they were going to go, and we would make the third floor Flowers building resources available to the out-of-towners, which in those days was basically typewriters and phone lines. And our people would be there to help them if they wanted to. If they wanted a quick and dirty interview with a student, student journalist is doing that. And we also agreed that all the information that would come out of the inside of the building would come through us. So that if the out-of-town journalists wanted to interview people or get information, they'd have to go through us. So in that sense, we helped shape the narrative, which was not as important as what they did certainly, but at least it was important enough to agree to do it and then to follow through. So it worked. And also, in Eastbrook, I don't know where they are now, but they used to be up on the Circle, whereas we were just diagonally across the campus from Allen Building. So they were more physically proximate to what was going on in case things blew up as they subsequently did.
What parts of the narrative were you trying to preserve?
We wanted to focus as much on their issues and on their demands than on whether they had guns or not. You know, were they going to burn records? So we kept the bore very small in hopes of as unfiltered as possible what they wanted and why. They weren't vandals, you know. I mean, ultimately, in those years, you know, there's on the one hand this, on the other hand that, so some of that was going to come in anyway, but at least on this hand part, we wanted that to be undiluted as much as possible. So, and in fact, whether they were willing to negotiate or not. For example, sometimes you would say, well, we can't talk to these people, they won't talk to us. Well, we would say, no. Chuck would say, no, we're willing to talk to you. So, in that sense, you know, we didn't, I guess we shaped the narrative, but we kept the narrative as close to what we thought reality was of it. So.
To as much as you can remember, like, how did you build this rapport with Chuck? Like, what was the history of that relationship so that this could be made possible?
I like to refer to those years as the Chronicle Red years. So we were journalists, but we were also advocates as well. We understood the contradiction, but we accepted the contradiction. So we had a very strong editorial position in support of the African American issues. We were a very left period of the newspaper. And Chuck, I believe Chuck wrote a regular column for us as well. And he was in my class, and he roomed with Reed, Kramer, who we just met. And I was very friendly with Reed and also Tammy. And so we kind of saw each other pretty regularly. I was pretty friendly with Chuck Hopkins, Tony Axum, another one of the leaders, and C.B. Claiborne, the basketball player, lived across the hall from me freshman year, so I knew him. I wasn't close with him, but I knew him.
Wow.
And there were some others. I knew Bertie. Bertie was very close with Tammy Holtman, who's, you know, Reed's wife. It was a kind of a, I don't want to say a tight group, but a small concentric group, you know. So I wrote a lot of what I thought. So Chuck knew where it was not like, you know, I'm really supporting you, but my fingers are crossed behind my back. You know, I mean, and we demonstrated together. I was outside the Hope Valley Country Club. That demonstration, most demonstrations I was in. So when I spoke in those days, I spoke on the quad, you know. So. And I liked Chuck, he liked me, and that was the, you know, by that time, I'd known him probably for 3 or 4 years, so it was not a Johnny-come-lately thing. And, he was a very pragmatic guy. Some members of the African Society were a little more suspicious of white people, understandably.
It's kind of amazing for us to count this having over 1,000 students out on the quad in support, like trying in some way to insulate protesters inside. Can you speak to, like, that's a critical mass of people, but it's not 8,000 students, right? Like, how did the average Duke student think about
Didn't care until the tear gas began going off and drifting into different buildings. And so there were people who were not at all radicalized, who didn't like the idea of cops on the campus, who didn't like tear gas. And so one of the, I guess, more popular slogans that was on a placard the next day was, "You use gas, so we cut class." So you can probably picture that in the archives. And so people just were really pissed off that there were cops on the campus. There were a lot of very conservative people there, you know, and most people, social change, it's, I would say, self-flattering, is a redemptive minority. It's always a minority. So in the 60s, everybody wasn't involved. A small percentage of people at elite white and black colleges. Gradually, opposition to the war grew, you know, 68, 69, 70, 72. But then not so much. There were a lot of people who hated us, really. They wanted to get on with their careers and making money.
Yeah, I read the original Chronicle coverage of the Allen Building, and then also the 25th anniversary, and it's crazy how similar they were. So it must have been very much like a minority position or ahead of its time.
But that's the way the world goes. Lenin didn't have a majority when he seized the Winter Palace. I think he seized the Winter Palace, I'm not sure. Anyway, go ahead.
My last question to you, is there anybody else we should definitely bother while we're here tonight?
I would say Tammy, if she'll make the time for you. Arnie Katz is here. He was sort of more at the sort of grassroots level at the time, as I recall. And I would say Ann Newman for sure, but talk to her last, or else you'll never get out of the
Okay, fair enough.
And she wasn't here then, but in terms of the era, she's very good on the era. But she didn't come until after Alan Billing, so. But she's going to steep herself in those things. Anyway, like I said, if you have any other questions, you have my email. I'm pretty good about that. I'm a writer, so I'm home most of the time.
Awesome. Okay. Sympathetic to what we're trying to do.
I'm hoping to come back. I've never been to Full Frame, so I'm going to come back, I think, in early April.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
And there's supposed to be another symposium then, and now I'm not sure what's going to happen on the African American thing, March 28th or 29th. I don't know if it's going to happen or not now, but it's funny because I quoted. I'm just finishing this big project for a journalism platform called Pointer.org, and it's on race in Southern newspapers from 1898 Wilmington up through today. And
1898 in Wilmington is a rough place to start. Wow.
Well, I mean, Tim's section was wonderful. Did you read the special section he wrote for before you were here? He wrote a special section in 2006 for the News and Observer, and it was great. I think you can get it online. It was. So I talk about the culpability of white-owned newspapers, both in sense of omission, that is, in the 60s, not covering the civil rights movement or shading the coverage, and commission, worst cases where these newspapers incited mass violence against black people. And there have been some apologies. 100 years is a long time to wait, or 60 or 70 years. But then I raised the question with historians like Bob. Is it better late than never, or is it too late? And what's the value of that when the people who are responsible are all dead? So you have living people at these papers
trying to wash their hands of it.
Well, apologizing for things that they don't have to take responsibility for. But then I carried all the way up to coverage of police shootings of black people today. So I go from 1898 to here. I don't know if Bob's quote will make it to the final edit, but it's in there. So anyway, I'm still doing what I've done since I read about racial justice 50 years now. So my son graduated here in 10, and my daughter graduated here in 13.
Okay, wow.
So a lot of my money is here.
I hear you. Yeah. Well, thank you for everything.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing
If you need maybe to point out any people.
Fair enough.
That would be great.
Thank you so much.